Are you ready to have me hook you up?
I am.
Okay, so let's do that. Then the one thing I want to do, Michelle, I'll hook you up and I'm going to explain to the audience what we're doing. Okay. But the very first thing I do need to do is I'll have you get rid of some of the oil on her skin. Right. So if you wouldn't mind doing that to the mastoid bone, left and right ear, and then I'll do your hair as well.
Okay.
I'll be doing a reference and an actual white reference and a black reference. Then I'll put the electrode. I'm going to use CZ tonight, and it'll be in the midsection of her brain, so we'll do that as well. So let me do that first one here. Let's see. So this is the white. I'm going to come over here. Put it right over here. I'm trying to adhere it, so this is my place where I can get good coherence. And we'll know that as soon as we get started. You okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then I'll take the next one, which is the black, and put it on the other side of the ear. You just have to have it has to stick or adhere well. I'm going from the nasium, which is by the nose, right next to the ears, too. It's directly there. And I'm looking for scalp. So you do make a mess of your client's hair. It doesn't hurt. Remember, it's not invasive. It might feel cold. Are you doing okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is our Nexus machine. And I'm placing one channel here for the electrode and a reference one as well. And I turned it on here so you can tell it's on because it has a green light. And then I'm going to come over here and we're going to start the actual neurofeedback session. What I'm doing with Michelle is an SMR protocol at about 12 to 15 hertz. And remember, we talked about what I'm trying to achieve is to have Michelle become more calm and focused. And that'll help with relieving some of her symptoms. So Michelle, you have to tell me what video you might like. We've done so many different ones, but what would you like? Airplanes, boats, animals?
Animals.
Animals? Okay, all animals? All right, do you want birds or just all animals? All animals?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't care, whatever.
All right, we'll do all animals. So I'm bringing the video file that Michelle has chosen to let the machine know, the software know, that she wants to do a puzzle with animals and birds. And so we have two screens. This is the screen that I would use as the neurofeedback technician. This is the screen that our client uses to do the actual neurofeedback for her. And the first thing I want to do is make sure I have Michelle as my client. And I'll go ahead and start it. I'm pushing record. We have a really nice electrode placement, Michelle. I need you to take some deep breaths, please. And just remember, Michelle, when you hear the birds, it's probably telling you that you're getting a little sleepy. The beeping is telling me that you're a little anxious, and I don't blame you for being a little anxious right now. So what I'm trying to do is reward those wonderful calming waves, and I'm inhibiting those high beta waves, and I'm inhibiting the theta waves, trying to reinforce those focused beta waves. Right now what I'm doing is checking to make sure that I'm having exactly the right inhibits and reinforcers. This is my SMR. Here's my high inhibit, which should be beta. This should be theta. Looking good. We do have a little bit, Michelle, some 60 hertz, and it might be because we've got lots of lights on. It might be that we have cameras, but we're going to continue on. Really nice thing about neurotherapy too is if I wanted to, I could also do skin temp. I could do tympanic skin response. I can measure her muscle tension. I can do heart rate variability. But tonight what I'm just trying to do is the one channel and doing SMR. In this screen, one of the things I did first of all is I wanted to see if I could get some smoothing factor. So I smoothed to the factor of 64. What you're seeing here, this is a raw EEG of Michelle's brain. And this is the filtered part. So this begins to look more like the brain waves we discussed earlier today. This DC offset telling me how well am I connected to her scalp. It's a really nice connection. But this 10 or 9 coefficient is telling me how tense is she. So what I may want to do is have her take some deep breaths again. And as she becomes more relaxed, this number will come down. Once again, you can hear some beeping noises. It's alerting Michelle. It's saying, Michelle, I need you to relax. She can make that beeping noise go away by relaxing more. You'll hear some birds. That's also telling her she might be getting too sleepy, so that would defeat the purpose of being focused. So it tells her to relax but focus. My reward column here, I'm trying to get her to let that whole puzzle unfold. I can push her a bit, and the puzzle will stop. So the brain knows to relax and see if it can hit the right brainwave. It's a perfect moment, Michelle. No birds, no buzzer, and it's perfect. Stop here. I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it as the session of SMR at CZ so I can call it up another time. Michelle, I know it was tough to do in front of an audience, but what did you think about doing this and having people watch it?
It wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad.
So you almost forgot that it was there?
I did. I did.
I could tell too that it took a while to get us there, but you finally got in tune with what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Towards the end, we had no birds chirping. I couldn't hear the beeping noise, and the puzzle was unfolding nicely.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling right now?
Very good. Calm.
Calm?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
Right when we started, I had a crink in my neck.
Mm-hmm. And the crink is gone?
It's gone.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle,
You're
for
welcome.
doing this. I really appreciate it.
The brain waves that we work with in neurofeedback are pretty well established, and they go in increasing amounts of electrical activity. The lowest brain waves are delta waves, and these are the brain waves that we use when we're in deep sleep, deep restorative sleep. The next level of waves are called theta waves, and these are kind of like the pre-sleep waves. You know, when we begin to get drowsy, or when they're a deep state of relaxation or even prayer, we're somewhat alert, but we're kind of between that alert state and that's ready to get into deep sleep state. Alpha waves are the next level of waves, and alpha waves are kind of like our body's automatic idle. We kind of still, we focus, but we're really not engaging any intense cognitive activity. It's the beta waves, the fourth level of waves that involve more of that activity. And when we're working on a problem, trying to do a math equation, figure out something in our life, we're probably engaging our beta wave activity.
You know, I was listening to you talk about that, and I remember I was teaching graduate school last semester and doing something on neurofeedback, and I came up with an acronym that helps me remember them, and it's taking the first letter, and it's do think about brain growth. So if you take the first letter, you've got a nice acronym. So do think about brain growth. And the one bandwidth we didn't talk about is gamma waves, which would be the next one right after beta. And I think that's usually best described where you're working really hard using your beta waves, trying to solve something, and you just can't figure it out. But all of a sudden you kind of go, I got it.
Right, a moment of deep insight
Yeah.
or a revelation of your personal truth somehow.
Aha,
Yeah.
I figured it out somehow. So I think that's another nice way to think about that. Do think about brain growth. And so as we talked about those bandwidths or the different brain waves, we might want to get into a little bit about some actual protocols that are used with neurotherapy.
Yeah, there are some somewhat standard protocols that are useful for many different problems. Some of these involve the different brainwaves, of course. The first one is decreasing delta. When delta is high, usually there are problems such as pain associated with that or inattentiveness. And decreasing that high delta wave is what you want to do to bring back some functioning in that area. You can also increase theta waves to help people fall to sleep. If you recall, I talked about theta as being that pre-sleep, kind of drowsy, dozing off. But people who have trouble falling asleep don't have very good theta waves. So we want to increase their theta waves to help them be able to fall asleep. For addictions, people with addictions and post-traumatic stress disorder, theta becomes a problem. You know, being in a drowsy state when you're in a classroom trying to learn doesn't work really well. So they have too high of theta, and we want to help them reduce their theta. The same thing happens with post-traumatic stress when people are sort of dissociated from normal interaction because they're so overwhelmed by some trauma. So again, we want to increase theta waves for them. Alpha waves are implicated in peak performance, and the great bandwidth for alpha waves, I think, is about 10 to 12 hertz. And people who can relax and focus and be calm function really well. If you think of Michael Jordan hitting all those three-pointers many years ago in the Bulls' great runs, he probably had great alpha waves going. He was very relaxed and couldn't believe he was making all the shots, but he was hitting everything. We also work in the beta range, and there's low beta and high beta. For folks who have trouble kind of being calm in their bodies, who have trouble with agitation, who can't relax, we'll do low beta or SMR training for them, and we'll try to increase those low beta waves. Folks with high beta waves, sometimes those are associated with anxiety kind of problems, compulsiveness, inability to kind of relax and calm down. And so oftentimes we want to decrease those high beta waves.
I was thinking too about maybe another protocol in that peak performance piece, and that's that whole thing of, you know, one of the things we haven't spent much time talking about is neuroplasticity, though. That partly what this will do sometimes is have the ability to create new neuronal pathways. And for me, with this, the neurotherapy can do too, is help us as we get older. And I think the idea, there's a little bit of talk about brain brightening, that we can just kind of tweak our brain a little bit to help us as we get older in age.
Yeah.
And boy, the idea that we can continue to exercise, eat well, build new neuronal pathways till we die is a wonderful thing for people as we get older.
Yeah. Neurotherapy can't heal damaged
Correct.
physical tissues in the brain. It can't do that. But it sure can help reroute new neuronal pathways to kind of restore some of the functioning that might have been lost.
We've been talking about protocols that we can use in neurotherapy, but I think we can talk about some current applications.
Right.
And we'll get into a little bit later, Ted, about the research that has happened. But I think this is really interesting too. There are efficacy levels, and with randomized controlled studies, they've found certain interventions that actually work. And for ADHD, one of the applications is ADHD, and they have a level 5 efficacy rate for ADHD. So that's a pretty high level saying this treatment works. There are lots of other applications though. Learning problems,
Yes.
learning disabilities. You mentioned earlier anxiety and depression. People have been doing neurotherapy with anxiety and depression. Pain control, I think, is incredible. Migraines, seizures, that has been effective. You also talked about trauma and addiction that's been used in neurotherapy. Some of the ones that I find really interesting right now, though, is sleep disorders. Helping people fall asleep would be really nice, and that helps us certainly live a better quality of life. There's been some wonderful research, I'm not sure it's at a level 5, but on the autism spectrum with things like Asperger's, autism, even ADHD, so that's certainly helpful. And we've been talking all along about just peak performance. optimizing the way our brain functions. And so there are many applications to neurotherapy.
Another area of application is with the physiological kinds of problems that people experience. These include things like pain disorders, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, TMJ, which is that muscular problem that people have in grinding their teeth oftentimes.
We've been talking about some interventions, we've talked about protocols, and it might be nice now to really back it up with some research that we've found. I'll talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, which would be the research I'm doing right now with children who have been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. These children are on stimulant medication, and I'll be doing neurofeedback with the treatment group. The control group will be there, and we'll be doing pre and post test of functional MRI. We know that when neurofeedback works with ADHD, but wouldn't it be fun to discover what does it do to the brain? Is there an anatomical?
Why does it work, or how does it work?
Yeah, is there an anatomical change in the brain after neurofeedback? But that's really supported by some work by Lubar. And what he found was there was a 75% reduction in ADHD symptoms after neurofeedback. I find that pretty amazing. There was another one that was done as well, that even after medication was discontinued, these ADHD children showed statistical gains 3 years after neurofeedback. So we know that not only does it work, but it works longitudinally.
Yeah, and some 80% of these kids were able to reduce their medications by at least half.
Isn't that amazing?
Some were able to get off their medications altogether.
And I think that's an important piece. We talked about the source of dysregulation could be extended medication, so if we can help people get rid of some of that, that would be wonderful. What are some other research that you can think of that would add to the literature?
There's some research that's been found working with children with learning disorders that they've been able to increase their IQ by 12 points as a result of neurofeedback.
That's pretty impressive as well.
It is.
Talk to us a little bit about the Peniston work on addictions there.
Well, working with persons with alcohol or substance abuse disorders, Peniston found that 80% of those folks are able to be sober after 4 years. That's huge. That's a long period of time to be able to be sober after stopping substance use.
So neurofeedback actually helped people in their sobriety.
Yeah, I think what it does is calm down the body, which helps them with relapse kinds of issues, and also helps them resolve the kind of traumas that are probably at the core of their addiction use.
I do remember another study they were talking about work with veterans, and they were talking about panic attacks and post-traumatic stress disorders.
That's right. The work with veterans found that only 20% of veterans who use neurofeedback had flashbacks. Some 2 years later, I believe.
Wow, that's helpful. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's another way that we can help people in their whole idea with panic attacks. I think there's another area that we haven't talked too much about, but the idea of epileptic seizures. And I know there's some work with Sternman and in the 2006, and they found that they were able to reduce almost 70% of recurrent.
70%, yeah, epileptic seizures. And there's also great research on migraines as well. Maybe a minor form of a seizure is a migraine. And so the same kind of protocol is helpful, which is that SMR protocol we talked about before.
The last piece of research, and we've mentioned it earlier about anxiety and depression, but there was an 88% improvement in depression after a 1-year follow-up using neurofeedback.
Yeah, how remarkable for folks who find that counseling and medication just isn't enough to be able to know that neurofeedback can really help them resolve their depression.
And so here's another tool that
Yes.
can aid in their progress and recovery. Perhaps the best way to end our program today is to talk about the many benefits of neurotherapy. What do you think some of the benefits are?
Well, of course, neurotherapy can be applied to many different problems, psychological as well as physiological.
And I really love that it's not invasive. I think that piece is just really important.
That's right. We're not sending electrical current into people's brains. We're really just measuring the current that's already there.
We're trying to resolve the problem at its source, which would be the brain.
Yeah, if you think about it, all behavioral problems have their source from the brain.
And I've enjoyed doing cognitive therapy. We know therapy works, but what I like about neurofeedback is it's based upon very objective principles of learning, classical and operant conditioning.
Yes.
You can measure these things. You can measure it behaviorally as well as through the EEG. So those are sources I really appreciate. So we can objectively document our progress.
Neurofeedback also has very few side effects. Some subjects will report feeling a bit drowsy after a neurotherapy session because they've been concentrating so hard.
I've also had little clients that tell me that they've worked so hard in a neurotherapy session that they're not drowsy, but they said, my brain is